Welcome to Game Theorem, where we have serious discussions about absurd entertainment.
I prefer the term autocrat. I would rule as a chief executive. I would not answer to a board of directors or any other entity. Nothing to impede progress. If you want to see the fate of democracies, look out the windows. Robert Edwin House, CEO of RobCo Industries and founder of New Vegas.
I'm Kira.
I'm Kyle. And today we are talking about Fallout.
Yes.
The world of Fallout, an alternate take on human history.
Mm-hmm. And there is a lot to talk about with Fallout, so we're going to be focusing on what happens, actually spoilers for Fallout, what happens before the bombs fall.
Well, the story of Fallout is essentially a series of games where it takes place in a post-apocalypse. Mm-hmm. However, one thing that really sets it apart from a lot of these other post-apocalyptic games in the genre is that the Fallout world is very similar to the 1950s. Mm-hmm. It's an imagination of what people in the 50s thought the future would be like, and then taking that argument to its extreme.
Yes, exactly.
So, naturally, people in the 50s had a huge fear of thermonuclear war. Mm-hmm. And that is represented in the series. So around the 1950s in the Fallout universe is what's called the divergence point.
All right.
It's where the history starts to deviate from our real history.
Yes.
Although there are a few things that are before that we will like to touch on. Mm-hmm. But the majority of the differences are going to stem from after World War II.
Yeah, exactly.
So stick around. Naturally, there are spoilers for the Fallout series, but since we're only going to be talking about the pre-war side of things from before the bombs fall, spoilers will be probably far and few between.
Mm-hmm. Pretty minimal.
We hope really to revisit this on a later episode and talk about the post-war history. There's just so much that we'd like to talk about. We didn't want to cram it all in one episode.
Yeah.
Especially because, we've played Fallout before. Our YouTube channel has a whole bunch of Fallout on it. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot we feel like we really want to talk about this series and really delve into it, this deep dive. Mm-hmm. All right. So you ready to begin, Kira?
Yes.
All right. I'll go first. That's all right.
Okay.
So in the beginning, a deity known as Ugquiltoth exists before all other known life. But one day, the eldritch creature will be feared.
That's already a deviation from our history.
You don't know that. Ugquiltoth. Lovecraft, it's a Lovecraftian thing. But I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay, next.
All right, in 7500 BCE, an ancient species settles what will be the Arabian Peninsula and rules for millennia before destroying themselves, leaving behind humans as their descendants.
Ancient aliens.
Oh yeah, because that happened in the Fallout universe.
Apparently.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm excited about it. 1215. The Magna Carta is signed by King John of England and English barons, greatly limiting his authority as king and placing more power into the hands of the feudal government. We're skipping ahead quite a bit here.
Mm-hmm. 1603, Toshiro Kago is abducted from feudal Japan into Mothership Zeta.
Mothership Zeta is a huge mothership piloted by aliens that have been watching humanity ever since we evolved. Mm-hmm. And apparently they like abducting people from feudal Japan.
Yeah, well, one person.
Well, yes. They like to collect humans as experiments, as collectible figurines.
I don't know, I guess, since they froze them.
They're called Zetans. They're often known just as aliens. Mm-hmm. Oh, my turn?
Yes.
1697, Andrew Endicott is abducted from Salem by the Zetans in Mothership Zeta.
Mm-hmm. 1770, Colonial American rights agitate British troops into killing 5 people in the Boston Massacre.
I don't think people realize this, but the Boston Massacre that's taught in every U.S. history textbook only killed 5 people.
Yeah.
Not really a massacre by any stretch of the definition.
Even serial killers have a stricter... Actually, no. That would count as serial killing if it was one person. I think the rule is 3 people for that definition.
I don't know if there really is a rule, but I definitely know it's kind of...
there is a legal rule because of...
About massacres?
Oh, no, not massacres.
But I think there's a certain connotation that goes along with it. Mm-hmm. Although possibly that's just because we live in a more populated time. Mm-hmm. In 1775, Great Britain and its American colonies go to war in what will be known as the American Revolutionary War.
In 1776, the United States Declaration of Independence is adopted by the Second Continental Congress and announced to Britain.
So far, it's mostly on track with what we know of our real history. Mm-hmm. In 1787, the United States Constitution is created and signed.
In 1791, the Bill of Rights amends the United States Constitution with 10 rights that all American citizens are guaranteed by their government.
In 1812, the United States and Great Britain return to war in what will one day be Canada.
In 1846, the United States succumbs to the concept of manifest destiny, starting the Mexican-American War.
In 1861, the Confederate States secede from the United States over differences regarding slavery and other things.
In 1865, the United States reforms as a nation following the Civil War and the assassination of President Lincoln.
In 1898, the United States blames a mechanical failure on Spain, starting the Spanish-American War and taking Spain's territories.
Yeah, in 1914, a cascade of European alliances plunges the world into World War I. The United States avoids the war at first.
In 1939, Germany invades Poland and plunges the world into World War II. The United States avoids the war at first.
There's nothing between World War I and II?
Nothing worth talking about.
Okay.
Oh, you mean like the Great Depression, I guess?
Yeah.
Sure, but that wasn't really a particular year.
Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, in 1941, after the events of Pearl Harbor, the United States enters World War II.
1942, the Sierra Army Depot is founded to store a defensive supply of U.S. ordnance.
In 1943, the Los Alamos Nuclear Research and Development Facility forms under codename Reservation.
In 1945, the United States detonates the first atomic weapons on Japanese civilians.
In 1949, the People's Republic of China overtakes the Soviet Union as the primary communist nation.
So you can see it now, World War II's passed. That's already a big difference from our time. Mm-hmm. That China succeeds the Soviet Union in power.
Yes.
And this is really because in the 50s, or the 40s, 45, around that time, people thought that China was going to be a big threat because people at the time were kind of friendly with the Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be something we're going to see here, that the Soviet Union is really going to take a backseat to China. Mm-hmm. In 1960, the United States adopts Hawaii as the 50th and final state.
In 1961, astronaut Bell of the United States Space Agency is the first human in space, but he dies upon a crash landing return. That's sad.
Yeah, in this timeline, the United States rushed into the space race much harder.
I see.
In 1969, the United States adds an intermediate step of government in the form of 13 commonwealths, complicating bureaucracy even further.
This happened in 1969 in this timeline?
Yep.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, only 9 years after we ended up adopting Hawaii as the final state.
Wow.
So that means the modern flag that we have today, that we've had for like 50 years, they only had it for 9 years. And then they switched to the Commonwealth system and they changed their flag.
Ah, okay.
You can see it all over the Fallout universe in that there's 13 stars in a circle reminiscent of the first American flag with one big star in the center.
Actually, didn't there used to be 12?
Oh, right, yeah, 12 stars because there's 13 commonwealths. The one in the middle counts as one of them.
Yes. All right.
So I wanted to give them a breakdown of the commonwealths. Is that okay? Mm-hmm. So the first commonwealth, the most important one, is the Columbian Commonwealth, which includes Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Then you have the East Central Commonwealth, which includes Ohio, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Then you have the Eastern Commonwealth, which includes West Virginia, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York, because they're all so small.
Wait, doesn't that mean that Fallout 4 takes place in the Eastern Commonwealth?
No, it doesn't.
Isn't Boston in New York?
No, it's not.
Or by...
No.
Really?
Really.
Where's Boston?
Massachusetts.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah.
Then you have the 4 states Commonwealth, which has Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. Mm-hmm. That's the game that Fallout New Vegas takes place in. You know what? We should have given a breakdown of which Fallout games there are. We'll do that near the end. Remind me.
Yeah, okay.
Then you have the Gulf Commonwealth, which has Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. Then you have the Great Midwest Commonwealth, which has Wisconsin, Minnesota, Illinois, Indiana, and Michigan. Then you have the New England Commonwealth.
Michigan.
Oh, Michigan?
Michigan.
Sorry. The New England Commonwealth, which includes Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. Sorry.
So that's where Fallout 4 takes place.
Yes.
In the New England Commonwealth.
Then you have the Northern Commonwealth, which includes Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota. Then you have the Northwest Commonwealth, which includes Northern California, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Alaska.
Isn't that where one of the first Fallout games takes place?
Partially.
Yes.
Then you have the Plains Commonwealth, which includes Nebraska, Kansas, Iowa, Missouri, and Oklahoma.
Basically the Midwest.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, that's a different one.
Oh.
Then you have the Southeast Commonwealth, which is Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Then you have the Southwest Commonwealth, which is Southern California, Nevada, and Hawaii. Oh, so that's where most of the New Vegas game takes place.
Yeah.
The 4 states one is just where the Legion's from.
Okay,
but don't worry about that, because then we have one more, Texas Commonwealth, which includes Texas and Arkansas. Arkansas got a real raw deal out of that.
Yeah. Texas is literally so huge that I'm not surprised that it almost became its own Commonwealth entirely.
Yep. So that's the new Commonwealth system. It's incredibly ridiculous.
Yes.
Because now not only do you have to deal with local stuff, state stuff, and federal laws whenever you're dealing with legality. Now you have to go from local to state to Commonwealth to federal, just complicating the government even further.
Yep.
Anyway, so next we have...
in 1969, the United States Space Agency's latest capsule, the Valiant 11, lands on the moon with the first humans to walk on another celestial object.
And so the flag they planted on the moon was the Commonwealth one.
Okay.
In 1970, astronaut Hartigan is abducted mid-space flight on the Clarabella 7 into Mothership Zeta.
Oh, yeah. Okay. In 1972, President Nixon is caught up in corruption charges but manages to keep a cult following.
Yay. Mm-hmm. In 1992, the Sierra Army Depot's directive changes from storing U.S. ordnance to instead trying to safely dispose of the excess military ordnance of the U.S. government.
Mm-hmm. In 2002, West-Tec is founded and begins the research that eventually culminates into the development of power armor. Really? I did not expect West-Tec to be the ones to do that.
That's their thing.
Aren't they medicine?
Virology.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, they also did power armor.
All right.
Although they're still going to be working on it for a while. Mm-hmm. In 2020, 2020, the United States Space Agency commissions the Delta IX rocket, the last manned rocket to the moon. Yeah,
we skipped quite a few years there. In 2021, Hubris Comics begin publishing comics, with the most popular being Grognak the Barbarian.
They had a few other ones, though. Like they're essentially a monopoly when it comes to the comic market.
I suppose.
Because they don't have really any competition.
Yeah.
They also made Captain Cosmos.
The Silver Shroud.
Oh, and Jangles, the Moon Monkey.
Oh my god, yeah.
And what else do they have? Silver Shroud. Man, I'm forgetting it. They had like a whole Avengers ripoff.
Oh, really?
With the Silver Shroud, Grognak the Barbarian.
That's pretty funny.
And a whole bunch of other...
Actually, if you see a cover...
the Mechanist.
Oh my god, yes.
And the Antagonizer.
Oh, yeah.
What were you saying?
I was saying, actually, if you see Grognak the Barbarian, a cover, it's not very child-friendly.
Oh, no. I mean, the man is, hyper masculine and killing something, taking the head off of something. And then there's a female damsel in distress that he's rescuing who is completely nude.
Yes.
And this was read by children.
Uh-huh.
Yay. Which
I believe one of the issues was like the virgin eater. So yeah.
I guess as long as it doesn't show any naughty bits, that it's safe for children.
Yeah.
Forget about mature themes, right? Okay, so next we have 2026. The original Vim Pop Factory burned down, leading to a reconstruction of the soda brand.
All right. In 2034, the last manned mission returns from the moon, and the Delta 9 rocket is converted for military purposes.
Because forget space exploration, sadly.
Yeah.
One thing you're going to start noticing is as this timeline goes on, we aren't investing any energy into renewable resources.
Yeah.
They keep going what they know, you know? It's how people in the 50s thought the future would be. So, in 2037, General Atomics International introduces the Mr. Handy robots for general construction and maintenance. So these first original Mr. Handy units are like some of the first like sold robots on the market. But they're very big, clunky, and they're really automatons. They have barely any intelligence.
Yeah. All right.
And they also had 8 arms originally.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
They're mostly for hard labor.
Okay. In 2039, a hardware update fixes early Mr. Handys that had interference issues.
In 2042, Robert House creates the company RobCo Industries and begins to manufacture robots. And they will, Robert House and RobCo Industries will end up competing with General Atomics International.
Yeah, all right. And also in 2042, John Caleb Bradburton begins tinkering with formulas as an amateur chemist.
In 2043, Mass Fusion is founded with the goal of giving clean energy to Boston.
Yeah. In 2044, John Caleb Bradburton invents the Nuka-Cola beverages and creates the Nuka-Cola Corporation.
Which is just a ripoff of Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
But much later in history. In 2044, when the Great Passion Fruit Famine hits America, the taste of Nuka-Cola is noticeably altered.
So this happens like shortly after he first...
Yeah, the original Nuka-Cola didn't even last a whole year.
Wow. All right. In 2047, RobCo Industries experienced major success in its robotics and becomes one of the wealthiest companies in the world.
Yeah, and one thing, when RobCo ends up becoming that popular, they ended up teaming up with General Atomics, and that's when they create the more modern version of the Mr. Handy.
And what about the Protectron? Was that just RobCo?
Well, that was just RobCo, but that was RobCo's first design, really.
Okay.
And they're most successful and popular because the Protectron is just a general robot. You can kind of do whatever you want to program it with.
Fair enough. All right.
So yeah, somehow we have advanced AI and robotics, even though most things are running off of vacuum tubes and oil.
In 2050, the Nuka-Cola Corporation opens the Nuka World amusement park to the public.
At first, it only has a few attractions, like I think the Safari and the main Nuka USA one.
And it meets the minimum safety standards.
Oh yeah, how's that song go? It's like, what are you doing until you get a Nuka-Cola or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's like, we have the most acceptable minimum safety standards yet.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know we're terrible singers. 2050, same year, the Sierra Army Depot's directive changes again. Instead of trying to dispose of excess ordnance, they're now developing and testing robotic, biological, and conventional weaponry.
Yeah.
Making more weapons now.
In 2051, citing political instability as their reason, the United States forcibly annexes Mexico for their oil.
2052, American citizens begin to realize how serious energy concerns are when Texas begins to run out of oil.
In 2052...
Same year.
Yeah, okay. In 2052, the United States ceases allowing most forms of legal immigration.
The United States always got tougher and tougher on... I'm surprised they waited until 2052.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
Well...
At this rate, it's going to be like 2020.
What was immigration like in the 1950s?
I don't know. Like, it was still probably pretty tough.
It was probably just better than it was today.
Yeah, as in more people got let in, but the conditions you had to stay in were probably much worse.
Oh, like, they're not as much labor protection, you mean?
No, not just that, but like, look, you arrive there and you have to go through customs and immigration. So in that time, I believe I've heard where you would be staying in a sort of like just a big place where all the immigrants stayed in while they're waiting for their papers to get in.
And of course, I can't help but think about the two main atrocities of this time, sending the Jewish people back during World War II, then all the stuff done to the Japanese.
Yeah, actually,
Americans.
I don't know if people know this, but America literally sent back that ship of Jewish immigrants, and Anne Frank was on that ship. So if they would have let those
people...
There
was 3,000 Jews, refugees escaping from Germany.
And if they had let those people in, Anne Frank would be an old woman, and if she stayed in Boston, she'd be living in Boston.
She could be a Fallout
That's where they arrived.
She could be a ghoul. Okay, but this is a bit of a tangent.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so back on track.
Lots of stuff happens in 2052.
Oh yeah, it's a big year. The first of the resource wars begins when the European Commonwealth, which is this amalgamation of all the European countries. Like, how the European countries all got together after World War II and they made the European Union? Well, in the Fallout universe, by the 2050s, that union is much stronger. They're now a European Commonwealth. They're treated as a single country.
Oh, wow, okay.
Kind of like how, England is technically a country, but the UK is like a super country made of countries.
Yeah.
Well, now imagine the European Commonwealth as a mega country made of countries.
Yeah.
Well, the resource wars begins when the European Commonwealth declares war on the Middle Eastern countries because the Middle Eastern countries were hiking up oil prices to extreme, enormous levels that the European Commonwealth could not afford.
And also later in that year, the United Nations effectively disbands when the U.S. president storms out of a meeting and ends negotiations.
Wasn't able to get what he wanted.
Yeah.
And then an infamous serial killer known as the pint-sized slasher made the headlines in the U.S.
Still in 2052. In 2053, a bioweapon is released as the new plague, resulting in the entire United States undergoing quarantine for a time. Wow, this happened?
Yeah, it's never
in
clear.
The Fallout world?
It's never clear who released the new plague. A lot of people think it was the own government.
How do you find out about this?
It was in some of the older games.
Oh, okay. I see.
But yeah, some people think it was the own United States government infecting their own citizens to like inoculate them. Like instead of waiting for the Chinese to give them smallpox, it's like inoculating yourself with cowpox. Because that's how you get immune to smallpox.
Ah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but that's just an analogy. But some people think it was literally China just poisoning America.
Later in 2053, wait, that's yours. You're next.
The first ZAX supercomputer is constructed by the Vault-Tec Corporation for the government. So the Vault-Tec Corporation was part of Project Safe House, which is something that the United States decided to fund a lot of money to from the Defense Department. And the idea is like, okay, you create vaults to protect us just in case global thermonuclear war ever breaks out.
What does that have to do with the supercomputer, though?
Oh, well, when Vault-Tec started building its vaults, they put a lot of funding into making the first ZAX supercomputer to run one of the vaults.
Oh, I see. All right. Later in 2053, a nuclear terrorism incident destroys Tel Aviv in Israel.
Is that how you say that?
Israel?
I think it's Tel Aviv.
Tel Aviv?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So a nuclear incident, that's very serious and scary. A lot of people were freaking out when this happened.
All right.
But then it got even worse. In 2054, in the European Middle Eastern War, a nuclear exchange devastates many countries and shakes the world.
You know what? I was really wondering what happened to Europe and the other countries.
Well, Europe wasn't devastated by the nuclear exchange. The Middle East was. They kind of just like launched nukes on each other. And I don't remember if Europe directly launched a nuke, but they definitely antagonized.
All right.
So yeah, basically the oil centers of the world now have been nuked.
Mm-hmm. In 2054, the Vault-Tec Corporation is given charge of Project Safehouse, a government project to build vaults to survive nuclear war.
Yeah, this is when they finally got the contract to start building all those vaults. That Zax was just in one of the first ones.
Ah, I see. Okay.
In 2055, West-Tec makes progress on developing a cure for the new plague, but they still have a ways to go.
In 2056, the Chrysalis Motors...
Just say it.
Chrysalis?
No, you had it right. You had it right.
Chrysalis?
But you were saying it like you were confused.
Well, I wasn't sure how to pronounce it. The Chrysalis Motors Corporation begins to sell their model Corvegas.
The United States in 2057 removes the Grand Canyon from the list of national parks and begins mining uranium there.
Wow, I didn't know the Grand Canyon apparently had uranium in this timeline.
Apparently it does. Although, I mean, we've never really mined there, so I guess we wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Because it's been protected as a national park for so long. But this is in 2057, so still a possibility.
Okay, next.
In 2058, the Nuka-Cola Corporation develops a new flavor, Nuka-Cola Wild, to add to their other flavors and to compete with Sunset Sarsaparilla.
Yeah, because Sunset Sarsaparilla was like the most popular soft drink in the southwestern United States because it had that whole like sarsaparilla root beer kind of flavor. And Nuka-Cola went in on that market, so they made their own competition. They set up an entire theme park in Nuka World called was it like Dry Rock Gulch, I think. Something like that.
Something Wild West themed
to promote their product. And then in 2059, the United States Army develops a military presence in Alaska to protect their oil interests.
In 2059, the first truly self-aware artificial intelligence is born. What intelligence? The Zax?
Oh, we don't know. It doesn't say which one. It's recorded in history at 2059. That's when it happened. Although I think it's a little debatable on what's considered truly. Maybe it's the first one that's self-aware.
Okay.
In 2060, alternative energy begins to overtake fossil fuels in demand for vehicles when oil becomes too precious to just waste on automobiles.
Wow. Later in 2060, after the Middle East runs out of oil, the European Commonwealth falls apart, leading to the European Civil War. Great.
In 2063, the Vault-Tec Corporation begins numerous drills and sign-ups for the many vaults whose construction has been completed by this point.
Wow. All right. In 2065, the hot summer incident occurs when a nuclear reactor in New York nearly went supercritical.
Yeah, kind of reminds me of that time the one in Japan did. You remember?
I don't. What was that?
There was a Japan nuclear or a Japanese nuclear plant.
Yeah, I did hear about
Although
that.
the reason that one went critical is because of a tsunami from an earthquake.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, so they had so many good stuff going on at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, tangents. 2066, the National Guard occupies Denver in an effort to quell the food riots.
Later in 2066, the U.S. president ends oil negotiations with China, which just ran out of oil.
So everyone's running out of oil, and alternative energy is only just now starting, so this is really late to be starting alternative energy.
Yeah.
In 2066, the United States, with the help of West-Tec, develops the first fusion cell. You want me to explain the difference between fission and fusion?
I think we're good.
Oh, come on, please.
Go ahead.
People think nuclear energy a lot of the time. I mean, maybe some of our listeners know better, but in case you don't, they think that there's only one type, but there's really two classifications of nuclear energy. The first one is fission. It's easier, but it's also kind of messier. It's where you take something like uranium, a really high energy element, and you split it in half, and then you take the energy that it's given from that when you do that, and that becomes your nuclear energy. It has a ton of nuclear waste, though, and it's the only reason we do it is because we're able to get out of it more than we put in. Mm-hmm. But, it's easy for something to go supercritical, like what happened in New York.
All right.
The opposite of that is fusion energy, where you take two atoms and you mesh them together and you create a new element. So, like, you would take the I don't remember when you split uranium. Like, just imagine like you split uranium into two. Imagine putting those two back together and making uranium. That's fusion. Mm-hmm. And that is incredibly hard to do. We've done it in labs in the real world, but we've never been able to make it, profitable. Like, you can never get more energy than you put in. At least we haven't figured out how yet. And in 66, they finally figured out how to do that. This, by the way, fusion is the energy source that the sun runs off of.
Wow. Okay. So we're basically trying to replicate how the sun gets its energy.
It would be a great alternative energy source, although from the looks of it, it's very hard to pull off.
Yeah, it is. All right. And later in 2066, in a desperate attempt to steal oil, China invades Alaska and the Sino-American War begins.
They needed their oil. We had it. 2067, T-45 power armor is deployed in Alaska for the Sino-American War. Developed by Vault-Tec, by the way.
All right. Later in 2067, a secret government organization known as the Enclave begins to form.
It's like a secret organization within the government.
And this was the group that planned for just in case of nuclear warfare, right?
No, the government, that was Vault-Tec, really. But some of the members of the government start realizing we might not make it out of this.
Oh,
so
they form the Enclave, too.
It's basically formed out of members of the elite government. Imagine it kind of like a social club.
Okay.
But everyone there has launch codes. Must have this many launch codes to enter. In 2069, Canadian citizens protest the Sino-American War and the U.S. military trampling through Canada.
Later in 2069, the instructional explosives guide, Patriot's Cookbook, is banned and ordered by the government to be burned, but it becomes a hot black market item.
You can actually still find it later on.
Yeah.
2069, Vault 13, the last of the vaults on the West Coast, is finally completed in its construction.
In 2070, the Chrysler Motors Corporation begins selling expensive fusion-powered vehicles, and they're sold out within days.
Because everyone just needs a car, and you can't, if your car was powered by oil, you can't drive anymore. Well, unless you're rich. In 2072, the United States orders RobCo Industries and General Atomics to create a superweapon called Liberty Prime.
Yeah.
It would basically be a giant super robot that could kill things with lasers and nukes and whatnot.
Yep.
But naturally, that's a very difficult project. They're going to be working on it for a while.
Later in 2072, an attempted sabotage of the Alaskan oil pipeline leads the United States to forcibly annex Canada.
So, welcome to America, Canada. 2073, Vault-Tec uses what they've learned from studying the new plague to develop immunity viruses for the government.
Immunity against, bioweapons?
Yeah, to prevent diseases. They're viruses that you give to people for immunity.
All right. In 2074, the United States sends covert power armor squadrons to mainland China with no success.
Turns out that going through marshes and swamps and power armor was not very successful.
Yeah, not surprising.
Because a lot of the Manchurian area of China had such swamps. In 2075, the Sierra Army Depot's AI becomes self-aware and calls itself Skynet.
Later in 2075, RobCo Industry copyrights the unified operating system that every RobCo terminal, machine, and robot uses.
How'd they go so long without a patent? Copyright.
Maybe they were the only one who could even had the program.
Possibly, but actually the way copyright works is the moment you create something, at least in the United States, it's inherently copyrighted.
All right.
But you can file for copyright protection, and it basically exists as a legal notice that the government recognizes your copyright.
Okay.
But copyright's still inherent in every piece of art you create. But you actually can lose your copyright if someone steals your invention, and you never actually mentioned it was copyright. This actually happened with the troll dolls.
Oh.
Because it never said on there that it was copyright protected, and because of that, when the people stole it, the Supreme Court upheld or I don't know if it was the U.S. court upheld that the troll dolls were now kind of public domain.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I think he later managed to get his copyright back, but it was too late. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so they probably just filed the paperwork, even though they had already had it copyrighted.
Yep.
2075?
That's yours.
Oh, West-Tech's experiments with viruses, leading to a breakthrough into developing what they call the forced evolutionary virus.
Or FEV.
Mm-hmm.
Later that year, in 2075, Dr. Braun of Vault-Tec closes his Vault 112 early for sadistic amusement with the virtual reality within the vault.
Yeah, one thing that Dr. Braun knows about, but not many others do, is that each of the vaults were never actually meant to save anybody.
Yeah.
They were actually sociological experiments set up by the government. The whole saving in case of a thermonuclear war thing was just the cover, maybe the original reason for creating it. But they wanted to do sociological experiments on their own populace, and this was a very easy way to do it.
Why would they do that, though? Like, what is the point of these experiments, especially if there is an apocalypse and that no one's around to collect the data?
Why would the government test on their own citizens? Are you kidding me?
No, just sociological experiments. Why would you need the data?
We've done this. Like, the government has literally dosed entire towns with LSD just to see what happened.
Oh, okay. Fine. Fair enough.
But I don't think they ever thought the war was actually going to happen. Just that there might be, like, a war or a skirmish or a false alarm. Everyone might enter the vaults and then from that point produce data. It's also possible that the Enclave was pushing for this within the government, thinking that, well, if there is a war, they'll survive it. They'll be around to collect the data.
Ah, okay, fair enough.
And Vault 112, like the experiment, like every single vault was different. They all had different experiments. Like some vaults didn't have working lights. Some vaults wouldn't open at the right time. Some vaults would have a failure of some sort. This vault had virtual reality. Mm-hmm. So the idea was to keep the residents alive in a virtual space instead of a real one. And the scientist that was the overseer of this vault, Dr. Stanislas Braun, he knew that things were going to go to crap soon. So he ended up locking up his vault a few years earlier than he might have otherwise.
Yep.
And I should also mention that he was literally like one of the heads of the Vault-Tec Corporation. He was part of a division called Future Tech.
Oh,
and that's why he had access to the virtual reality.
Oh, yeah, fair enough.
But yeah, so he closes it and just spends years in there just torturing the other citizens because he has administrator access to the virtual reality.
Yeah.
Okay.
In 2076, RobCo Industries aggressively buys out Repcon Aerospace.
Since the government's no longer going to space, this is RobCo's attempt to buy an aerospace company with the hopes of one day being able to send rockets out.
Yeah. Repcon, was that the government's?
No, it was a private company.
Oh, okay.
It was
working on?
The SpaceX of its day.
Okay.
Well, they claim to have rockets in space, but there's really no evidence that they ever actually got around to sending them.
Okay.
I mean, it takes decades to be able to do that kind of stuff.
All right.
2076, Army Captain Maxon and his team are assigned to monitor the West-Tec facility.
In 2076?
You don't have to keep saying the year.
Okay. Canada's annexed into the United States as a Commonwealth, and any protesters are shot on sight. Wait. Wasn't Canada annexed earlier?
Yeah, as a territory. But now Canada becomes the 14th Commonwealth.
Oh, okay, I see.
So this is why sometimes you'll see flags that have 13 stars in a circle and then one in the middle.
Oh, okay.
Because those are the ones counting Canada.
Ah, all right.
However, you'll still see a lot of the older flags around before this time, and only so many designs were updated here and there.
Yeah, okay.
It may be hard to imagine because we haven't updated our flag in the real world for so long.
Yeah, we haven't needed to.
But when you do, there's naturally going to be some overlap.
Yeah.
In 2076, I gotta stop saying the year because things are really amping up here.
Yeah.
The M42 Fat Man launcher is a miniature nuclear catapult developed in Boston.
And T-51 power armor is deployed on the front lines of Anchorage, Alaska.
It's considered the newest and greatest power armor.
Yep.
Then martial law is declared in many parts of the United States because of riots going on all over the place.
Yes, and finally, in 2077, gas prices rise to $7,450.99 per a gallon.
Naturally, most American citizens just walk everywhere they go now. And because of that, they become a lot more isolated. Only those that are rich enough can afford the alternative energy vehicles.
Oh, yeah. Or actually afford to get gas.
Oh, yeah, that too. Although almost no one buys gas anymore except for the government.
Actually, I think the fusion cars are pretty proliferated. You see them so all around.
Yeah, but remember, they literally get sold out anytime they get it. So it's like a first come, first served. If you didn't wait in line for 3 weeks straight to get one of the fusion cars, you're going to have a hard time getting them.
Yeah, fair enough.
Now, they are getting more common, but no, it's actually said in the games that a lot of people just walk to work now.
Wow. It's crazy.
Then the United States Army commissions General Atomics International to manufacture Mr. Gutsies, which are combat models of Mr. Handies. Mm-hmm. I should also mention that there was a variant called the Mr. Orderly that was used for medical purposes. Yeah. And there was also a Miss Nanny, which is literally just a female version of the Mr. Handy.
Yeah, all right. Robert House, who is the CEO of RobCo, predicts the nuclear exchange is inevitable and begins making preparations to preserve himself and Las Vegas, where he lives.
Which was his beloved hometown. Mm-hmm. T-51 power armor wins the Sino-American War for the U.S. and then is used for domestic crowd control.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, literally sending in power-armored metal suit soldiers to quell riots of your own citizens.
Yeah. The forced evolutionary virus research has leaked to a stunned populace, and many suspect relations to the new plague.
So it seems almost confirmed, or at least hypothesized, that West-Tec was related to starting the new plague. Archimedes orbital laser artillery is developed and commandeered by the U.S. Army.
The U.S. president and his enclave forces should secure themselves in a stronghold at a secret Pacific oil rig.
Nuka-Cola CEO Brad Burton undergoes the Leap X program, which preserves his head in like a cryogenic jar in a bunker beneath Nuka World. It should also be mentioned that they were developing, they used that same technology to end up developing an isotope additive to add to Nuka-Cola, which they rebranded as Nuka-Cola Quantum.
Yes. Army Captain Maxon and his team discover the government's experiments at Mariposa,
the West-Tec facility.
Ah, okay.
They discover the FEV, and they're horrified by this.
Yes.
And that leads us to October 23rd, 2077. So there's a lot going on this day.
Yes.
Okay. So can I start?
Yes. Okay.
So the morning of October 23rd, 2077 was a morning like any other day, right?
Yeah.
Things were tense, but the United States noticed that there were many Chinese submarines surrounding the waters of the United States on that day. Mm-hmm. China had sent in many submersibles.
Are you really going to try to go through the entire day?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you okay?
That's fine. Just, okay.
But the submersibles did nothing. They just sat there. They were more like an ominous threat. They might have not even realized it, but America knew they were there. Mm-hmm. In response, the United States retaliates by sending in armed forces to invade China.
Of course.
Right. And that's kind of all we know. Because then someone launched a nuke.
And the Great War.
But here's the thing. No one really knows for sure who launched the first nuke.
Yeah, no one knows who started the apocalypse.
But someone launched the first ICBM, and then the entire world retaliated and launched theirs.
Yep.
Specifically America and China, but also a lot of other countries had ICBMs as well. Mm-hmm. The Soviet Union, any remaining powers in the European Commonwealth.
Yep.
If you ask the president of the enclave, he claims that, it was China that launched first. But he's obviously biased, and he's a perpetual liar. And the one you talk to is one from like 100 years later, so he didn't live through it.
Yeah.
So of course he's going to blame the other guy.
Yeah,
I'm sure
of course.
if you asked the chairman of the China's government, that they would claim America did it. Mm-hmm. In actuality, we do have some evidence for who launched the first ICBM.
All right.
Remember Mothership Zeta we talked about at the beginning?
Yes.
There is a recording on Mothership Zeta where the Zetan aliens were poking and prodding something. And usually they would interact with people like by literally dissecting them. Mm-hmm. But in this particular recording, they seem to be doing something wirelessly or remotely, because you couldn't hear the response of the guy that they were prodding. But it is recorded and written down. There was a general who was of the United States, who was talking to somebody, and he was giving them a dissertation of everything they had. I think, it's not clear who he's talking to, whether he was talking to someone else on like a phone, or whether he was literally just talking out loud because the aliens were like manipulating his mind. But he starts listing off all of like the ICBMs, the airplanes, the carriers, all the military assets the United States has.
Yeah. And
then eventually he's like, and wait, what? And the launch codes are, no, don't make me do this. Don't make me do, the launch codes are, and the audio cuts off.
Oh my God.
So the aliens learned what the launch codes were.
Yep.
I mean, they might not have had access to like all of America's artillery, but all they needed was one.
Yep. To start mutually assured destruction.
Exactly. And with alien technology, they might have literally infiltrated the silo where they got the launch code for, or they might have been able to manipulate someone, or maybe that very general, to do it. Mm-hmm. And that might have been how the first nuke was launched.
Now, this is just a theory.
Well, no, not even that. Like, I think there's enough evidence to really support this.
Yeah.
They had the launch codes, and then hours later, kaboom.
Yeah, fair enough. All right.
I don't think that's a coincidence.
Yeah. So no one really knows who started the war, but this is something you learn as a player that severely suggests that this is how it started.
Some people discount it. They don't like the idea that aliens started it, but I feel like they were just the instigator. They knew mankind was on the edge of killing itself, and so they just kind of popped the bubble, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. It was going to happen anyway.
A lot of people also compare it to a petri dish. They've been experimenting and testing and abducting us for so long that we were like an experiment that was going beyond our control. We threatened to we were doing the space race. We might have gone out of control from their perspective, whatever their grand goal was. Mm-hmm. And so this might have been their penicillin. When experiment's done, you kill the petri dish.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. Although, people are stubborn and didn't survived.
Well, true, because war never changes. I do think there's something else important to point out.
What?
There are actually records of many artificial intelligences, such as several ZAX computers, the PAM predictive analysis machine, Skynet, and certainly many others, of actually knowing or predicting that there was going to be a great war.
Oh, wow.
And they did nothing to stop it.
Of course not.
So some people blame AI for starting the war, but what seems to be more likely is that they just allowed it to happen.
Yeah, I think that would be fair.
Which is really interesting and scary.
Yeah.
Anyway, the nukes were launched. Mm-hmm. The main character from Fallout 4 hides in the vault.
Yep.
And everyone starts rushing to the vaults, but lots of people who signed up for the vaults did not make it in. Mm-hmm. And the warheads were only in the air for 2 hours as they flew around the world and aimed for their targets.
Yep.
You might ask, why didn't they just shoot them down? Well, there was something called the Star Wars program in the real world that was supposed to do that. Basically, those things are going so fast, it's just not practical to shoot them down. Even today with our technology, we can't reliably do that.
Uh-huh.
So everyone just sat and watched there. A lot of people would scramble and try to find their way into a vault. Mm-hmm. And because of that, a lot of people didn't actually make it into their vaults.
Yep, it's very sad.
Robert House was trying to protect Las Vegas. He literally had like sentry turrets and lasers protecting it, literally shooting down missiles as they approached New Vegas. I said shooting down wasn't possible, but like it's not like he's shooting it down over the Pacific. Like he's literally seeing it head towards him and he shoots it before it impacts.
Yeah.
He doesn't care if the surrounding area gets nuked as long as Vegas survives. Uh-huh. So lots of places around the world get completely wiped off the map. The landscape literally changes and buckles as geography is changed from all the impacts. Mm-hmm. Several places like the White House, like Las Vegas is attempted, and I'm certain many other capitals and whatnot are just nuked to the ground. Mm-hmm. Because everyone was aiming, like Las Vegas, for example, had like over 40 nukes heading for it.
Wow, really?
Yeah, people had really stocked up their ICBMs.
That's crazy.
Oh, I should have mentioned that. It stands for Intercontinental Ballistic Missile, in case those of you don't know. So yeah, that's pretty much all of pre-war history. After this point, we have nothing but post-apocalypse. And there is some interesting history we would like to go over what happens to that. But essentially, the civilization meter on humanity has been reset to 0.
Yep, basically.
And everyone has to start over. Mm-hmm. There's some interesting stuff that happens with Maxon's team at the West-Tec facility, by the way, in Mariposa.
Oh, really?
They end up being the original members of the Brotherhood of Steel.
Oh, okay.
And Maxon is their leader.
Ah, all right.
So, yep, we'd really like to come back and revisit this. Is there any general Fallout stuff? We still got some time you want to talk about, Kira? I know I've been talking for quite a while, so here's your chance.
I am just like... This is literally the entire history of what leads up to, the Fallout games, because the Fallout games occur... Oh, wait, weren't we going to go through where each game takes place or something like that?
Oh, thank you. Can I do it real quick?
Yeah. All right.
So, the first Fallout game takes place in the California area. Mm-hmm. And, it's in the post-apocalypse in the year 2141. Mm-hmm. And then, so that's only 80, 90 years after the bombs fell. So society's still recovering. The second game, Fallout 2, takes place in California again, and it takes place in 2242. So 100 years after that.
Mm-hmm. And
then, okay, so you have a bunch of side games after Fallout 2. You had Fallout Tactics, which takes place in the Midwest around the Chicago area.
All right.
And then that took place in 2196, I think. Uh-huh. And then there was Fallout Brotherhood of Steel. I forget when that one takes place. 2206.
No one cares. That one is these side games, hardly anyone ever played them.
Well, they tried to make it from an RPG into a fast-paced shooter kind of thing.
Yeah, whatever.
Which, as we all know, is a terrible way for the game to go.
Yes.
But that took place in Texas.
Uh-huh. And
then you had what would be called Fallout 3, except... it was canceled when it was 95% complete.
Oh, really?
Yes, and this would have taken place in Colorado.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because it was canceled, it's often now known as Fallout Van Buren. But because it was so complete, a lot of people will still consider it when talking about the history of Fallout. We include a couple of entries from that game, but not everything, because not all of it really jives well with the rest of it. Mm-hmm. And then you have...
actual Fallout 3.
Yes, when Bethesda bought the IP.
Yes, which takes place in the Capital Wasteland, which is like Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I should mention, Interplay was the company that created Fallout, and thank goodness for them. But Bethesda revitalized the series, and that's great. And Capital Wasteland, you said?
Yes.
Which is Washington, D.C.? Mm-hmm. And then you have Fallout New Vegas, which takes place in New Vegas, Nevada.
Las Vegas.
This one was made by Obsidian. Many of their founders were from Interplay. Mm-hmm. And, we should mention, Fallout 3 took place in 2277. Uh-huh. And New Vegas took place in 2281.
All right.
So by this time, we're so far in the future, it seems like with every game, they don't really want to go too much further in the future.
Because then they'd have to actually have rebuilt civilization.
Yeah, it's already a stretch to think that they wouldn't have rebuilt it by this point.
Yes.
At least to some degree. Because then you have Fallout 4, which takes place in Boston in 2287.
Yep.
Which is only 10 years later. But the entire place looks like it's destroyed.
Yeah.
So those are all the Fallout games. There's also Fallout Shelter, which is a mobile game.
Yeah.
Where you get to just build your own vault somewhere in the wasteland.
But none of that's actual canon.
Well, it's just difficult to take as canon because...
Yeah, you just make your own random vault. You actually get to choose a number and everything, too.
Yeah, if I could build a Vault 3, but it's not full of raiders.
Yeah.
Unless...
No.
I could just let it get overrun. So, can I talk about Robert House?
Oh, okay.
Mr. House is my favorite character in the game.
Yes.
He's like one of the most influential humans in the entire Fallout story. And he's based on a real-world historical figure, Howard Hughes. Do you know about him?
No, I don't.
He was like an eccentric billionaire kind of thing, or at least millionaire. And he loved Las Vegas, so much so that in the last years of his life, he became a kind of a hermit and a permanent shut-in at one of the casinos in Las Vegas.
Oh my God.
So much so that when they tried to kick him out because he was like ruining the hotel room by never leaving, he instead bought the casino.
Wow. Yeah.
In fact,
that's a reference to the fact that Robert House literally
lives in
a casino.
That he doesn't let anyone use.
Yes, the Lucky 38.
And also, he bought his own TV station and he would just tell them what to play on it every night.
Wow.
So, like, and other people could watch this TV station, but, like, sometimes, like, he would call them up and say, oh, I missed that last part. Rewind it, like, 10 minutes, please.
Oh, my God.
And so other people would be watching it, and they'd be like, wait, what?
Oh, my God, that's crazy.
They'd call up the radio studio, and they're like, what's going on with the TV channel? And we're like, sorry, we had technical difficulties, but why is it playing this movie? I thought you guys were going to play this other movie. Well, the owner of the station changed their mind.
Yeah, wow.
So, yeah.
I did not know he was based on a real person.
But he's not the only character that's done this way. There is another very prominent video game character based on Howard Hughes, and that is Andrew Ryan from the BioShock series.
Oh, really?
And both Andrew Ryan and Mr. House have objectivist principles because they're based on the same guy.
That's really cool.
And that's really the idea that I am an incorruptible man, I am an ultimate good, and through trade, through capitalism, I can bring humanity to a better beacon.
Yeah.
Of advancement. And I think it's a really cool comparison because Andrew Ryan proves how that is wrong, how he is corruptible, and how his practices will bring his city to its ruin. I guess that's a spoiler. You find that on the very first moment of the first game, so it's not really a spoiler. But meanwhile, Mr. House is like the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Shows that the rest of humanity brings the world to ruin. He really will bring us out of it.
Yeah.
But because, I don't agree with objectivist principles sometimes, that I could very much understand why you would want to side against Mr. House, but it's just so hard to do so when he seems to be such a preferable option, at least philosophically, in my personal opinion, to the other options. Yeah. He really does seem incorruptible, but you never know for sure whether he will corrupt, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, I just wanted to talk about that. I love that character.
Yeah, I really like that character.
Very complicated, makes you really think. I'm not saying like I love him like I would want to be friends with him.
Yeah.
I just like the discussion you can have about him.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so I guess we're done here, right?
Yep.
Thanks for listening to Game Theorem. Well, crap. If you have any corrections or suggestions, we have an email at gametheorems@gmail.com, and we have a whole bunch of social media, so check that out.
Yes.
Okay, bye.